Welcome to the Vision by Protiviti interview. I'm Joe Kornik, editor-in-chief of Vision by Protiviti, our global content resource looking into the future to examine big themes that will impact the C-suite and executive boardrooms worldwide. Today, we're exploring the future of ESG and its strategic implications for people, process, and the planet. And I'm happy to welcome Tom Tropp to the program. Tom is Global Chief Ethics Officer for Gallagher, a Rolling Meadows, Illinois-based global insurance brokerage, risk management, and advisory firm, helping clients address risk, protecting assets, and recovering from losses. As Global Chief Ethics Officer, Tom says his job is to make sure the firm is doing the things it should do. While compliance is a must-do, ethics is a should-do. Tom, thanks so much for joining me on the program today.
It's good to be with you.
Tom, let's start with your role as Global Chief Ethics Officer at Gallagher. What does that role entail?
Well, it's a little bit different than it is. Well, it's actually kind of a lot different than it is from a lot of companies. We established this position 15 years ago, and the concept is that we clarified the difference between compliance and ethics. So we have a chief compliance officer who is a lawyer who reports to our general counsel, who reports to our CEO. I am the global chief ethics officer. I report directly to the CEO, and I'm dealing with issues that focus on values. So we say that, is simplified, we say that compliance tells us what we must do, ethics tells us what we should do. It's about beliefs and values and culture. When it is a legal matter, it goes to the compliance department. When it's something to do with the values of the company, the culture of the company, it comes to me. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of crossover. I will get something that I feel, you know what, we need to have the lawyers involved in this. They will get something and say, hey, we need to have Tom handle this. So it's been interesting. As I said, it's 15 years ago we established it. We think there have been just a small number of companies who have copied it. We know they copy it in a sense because they very often call me and say, "How do you do this? How's this structured?" And so we think it's a different way of approaching it. We think it's better. For us, it has proven to be better for us.
Is there anything you can share? I'm just curious because 15 years seems like a decent amount of time. I don't think ethics was quite as front burner of an issue perhaps back then that it is today. So anything you can share about the evolution of the role over those 15 years?
Oh yeah, it was interesting when we first Pat Gallagher, if he was on the call, would tell the story. So Tom and I were talking. I had just joined the company. I was a merger partner, and I had just finished 4 years at the University of Chicago at the graduate school there studying ethics. And I said to Pat, Pat, I think you need a chief ethics officer. And I don't know exactly what that does, but I think you need to have one. We talked for a while, and Pat said, I think that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Let's do it. And we did it. And it's evolved. The initial concept was to go out into the field, visit with our branch office. Now, we were a much smaller company then. We had 7,000 employees in 2 countries. Today we have 42,000 employees in 51 countries, so it's a different company now. But initially, the idea was to go out and talk to our employees, ask them if they think we're ethical, talk about ethics, what it means, and then listen to them. We called my visits listening sessions. We learned some interesting things. I think, specifically to answer your question, one of the very first things that surfaced, we had just opened our processing center in India. Brand new project for us. We had a couple hundred employees over there. We've got over 7,000 now. But we had just opened that, and I started visiting offices, and people were saying, we think it's unethical that you're sending jobs to India. Came back and talked to Pat about it, and we realized what the problem was. We weren't sending jobs to India. We were creating facilities to make the jobs in the U.S. more efficient. And we realized what had happened was that we hadn't communicated it properly. We hadn't really focused on the fact that this was set up to improve your job. And that was a catalyst to convince us that we had some value in this and we needed to keep going. So as the years have gone by, boy, I'll tell you, Joe, we have surfaced so many things, so many good things that I hear in the field and so many problems. And it's very easy to address those issues when you're reporting to the CEO, chairman of the board.
Sure, absolutely. It makes it much more of a strategic role, obviously. Um, so what are some of those, sort of those ethical standards and maybe loftier goals that Gallagher has set that go above and beyond just, basic compliance? And does the insurance industry present any unique, challenges?
Yeah, we have a document called the Gallagher Way. You can look it up on our website, and we invite people to read it and to use it. It's got 25 tenets, things that we believe in. We wrote it in 1984, and it became a standard, the grounding for our company. So all 25 of those things talk about what I would put into the ethics category. Even a few of them that talk about sales, they talk about how to sell appropriately, ethically. For example, number 7 is empathy for the other person is not a weakness. It's okay to worry about each other. Some companies that we've read about, you've read about it, that's not accepted. Go back to your desk and get to work. Number 7 is we're all cogs in a wheel. We're all important. We have an award that we give to people that any employee can recommend an employee the COG award, and we send them a certificate that says you did something that made you a cog in the wheel. Those are our goals. Our goals are listed in that Gallagher Way, and I believe of our over 40,000 employees, I think 90% of them can, if you ask them, can start naming 2 or 3 of those 25.
When you think about sort of where ethics fits into ESG, I mean, ESG has been something that, has become, top of mind for most business leaders over the last several years, and certainly ESG falls into that. In general, how would you say companies are doing these days when it comes to sort of where integrity and ethics fit into sort of the overall ESG model?
I worry a little bit about it. Initially, when this first surfaced, the term 3, 4 years ago, we I was asked by our board, well, what is this ESG thing, and how are we supposed to focus on it? And I said, look, our company's over 90 years old. ESG is everything we've been doing for 90 years. It's just that it never got a title. It used to be called corporate social responsibility. Now they have brought it together, and I think it's great because it gives us a singular terminology to deal with. Unfortunately, about every 3 weeks, the definition of ESG changes, and so it's an evolving thing. I believe that it's good. I think it's a good thing we're doing this. My fear at this point regarding ESG is that it's going to move toward Milton Friedman instead of Ed Freeman. So Milton Friedman, Nobel Prize winning economist from the University of Chicago, alma mater. His theory was called stockholder theory, and he said the only job of the president of the CEO of a publicly traded company is to grow value for the stockholders. Ed Freeman, 15 years later, University of Virginia, said same thing, but he used the word stakeholders, and he included all of the stakeholders of an organization. My fear at what I'm seeing with ESG now is that it's becoming driven by the investor community rather than the other stakeholders, rather than favoring the other stakeholders. And I'm fearful of that. I'm afraid that it's going to become something that is only focused on profit. Encouraging people to buy our stock because we're ESG approved, as opposed to encouraging people to respect us because we're worrying about all of those things.
Is there anything that you or other business leaders can do to ensure that they don't fall into that trap, that they get it right?
Absolutely, and I think we're doing it. I think we're all doing it. And I'm so impressed with some of the things I'm reading in the business journals, how people are focusing on this and are look at what's going on with climate change. I mean, there is no way that climate change and global warming would be as big a subject today as it is unless we were focused, and again, on identifying this connected concept of ESG. Now, it's becoming in some countries, the UK in particular, and Australia following closely, and then Canada. It's becoming a G as opposed to an E. It's become, hey, you will do this type of thing, and that's fine. I think that's great. But it's also when I talk to our clients and we survey our employees rather, when we survey our employees every year on call it a culture survey, always the first thing these folks bring up is what are we doing for the climate? I mean, it's a huge issue, and I believe companies are starting to see that among their employees and their other stakeholders too, their clients, their vendors. It's a huge issue, and I think yeah, my fear about the investor community thing is real, but I'm also comforted by the fact that the other stakeholders are also focused on this and are pushing companies to respond.
You touched on a few of these, but I'm just curious what's required. I mean, what else besides some of the things you've already talked about is what's really required for a company to excel in terms of its ethics and integrity? I mean, what advice would you give business leaders around, what would be important for a company in order to excel in those areas?
Well, I think the first very logical answer to that is um, leadership from the top. Uh, this has to go up to senior management. There has to be a conviction on the part of senior management that these things are important. If senior management doesn't buy into it, forget it. It's not going to happen. Now, senior management can't run it, but they have to support what's going on. So I don't create anything that we do. There's people in various departments in the company who create that, but they know that they have support from someone who reports to the chairman. And then I think that's critical that you have to have that. Then I think you have to have a culture in the organization that encourages that circular thinking. If you don't have that, you're never going to get good positive input. The stuff we learn about all of these subjects from our employees is absolutely critical. I just had a conversation yesterday with we decided we wanted to sponsor a particular organization that deals with a certain type of illness, serious illness. And so I looked for someone who was focused on that. I found someone. I talked to that person yesterday, and he totally changed my thinking on it. He said, "No, that's not the organization you want to support. It's this other one that is doing more important things in that area." I said, "Fine, do the research, prove it to me, and then let's go." So I never would have thought of that myself. Came from the field. People, there's an amazing amount of wisdom out there in every company. You just got to tap into it.
Well, Tom, last question for me. You've been incredibly, generous with your time, so I appreciate that. We call this program Vision because we want to bring smart people together and have them look out, a decade or more and give us their vision of the future and what they sort of think, where they think this is all headed. So when you think about sort of sustainability and specifically, easy for me to say, ethics, any predictions about, what kind of world you think we'll be in a decade from now or 2035, let's say?
Well, I could tell you what I wish would come true. Um, it's funny, we're talking about setting our net zero goal, and a lot of companies are doing 2050. We decided to do 2052. We haven't announced it yet. We haven't officially made the decision, but we think we're going to do 2052 because that'll be Pat Gallagher's 100th birthday. And I figure the two of us are going to show up at the party, right? In wheelchairs. So I think I don't worry about our company in a decade or longer. We're very focused on promoting people from within in our organization, and you don't get promoted if you don't buy the culture. And so I'm pretty sure we're going to have the same type of emphasis. I am optimistic, and I find myself sort of sort of wondering if I'm insane when I say that because there's so much pessimism in the world today. But I find myself optimistic about that. And I do think, in spite of some of its flaws, I really think this ESG movement is going to make a difference. I think people are really starting to focus on these issues, and I believe companies are responding. And I think they're responding in both ends, both the stockholder end and then the end with all the other stakeholders. So I'm optimistic, and I sure hope I'm right.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. I mean, businesses can really lead the way on this one, I think. Perhaps, even more so than they have on things in the past. I do think that this is an area where business can sort of run with this cause and do really good things.
I hope so. I hope you're right.
Tom, thanks again for your time today.
It's my pleasure. Always a pleasure to be involved with your group.
And thank you for watching the Vision by Protiviti interview. For Tom, I'm Joe Kornik. We'll see you next time.